One of the challenges that we had was we had very limited banking opportunities. When I came into the business, we might have had maybe $30,000 to $50,000 on a line of credit. At the time, our driver pay weekly was $18,000 to $20,000. We had a great regional bank, but they only gave us enough to get halfway to. So within about 5 years, we were able to engage a new bank. We've got $1 million line of credit. I'll say Key Bank, which has been phenomenal. And we went from limping along literally to surging. We were in the revenue range about 2 and 3 million, running about 30 independent contractors within an 80-ish mile radius of Indianapolis. Today, in excess of $12 million, 45 W-2 employees, 200 independent contractors. We'd opened up really 3 additional locations. We purchased a building, pretty significant jump.
Part of the Las2First is for you to tell your personal journey of Las2First. I know you've had an experience that most of us, I get choked up thinking about it. Your son, Noah, passed away.
Yeah.
How does that just not drown you in pain and sorrow? What did you find in that experience to keep you going?
Losing a child there's nothing else to say. I started thinking about my own mortality. So maybe it pushes me a little bit harder, honestly. It's giving me a new fire to give my all, not just for my son, for myself.
I'm your host, Jason Burns, and we'll be bringing you the stories from the front lines. Everything from last mile to the first mile in the most dynamic industry in today's supply chain. If you like the content we're producing, the videos we're releasing, the stories we're telling you, give us a like, subscribe to our channels, give us some feedback on how we can improve your Las2First journey. If there's one thing we know about last mile logistics, it can be the most challenging but critical component of any supply chain. But drop-off, they make it easy. I sold my business to drop-off a few years ago and had a first-hand experience to see why they're the leading provider of same-day delivery solutions in the healthcare, retail, and industrial sectors. National brands trust Drop-Off to deliver same-day solutions with transparency and timely deliveries to satisfy their needs. Rated as one of the best places to work by the Austin Statesman and a proud recipient of the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies in America, Drop-Off is transforming the $30 billion same-day delivery industry. Call 888-DROP-OFF or go to dropoff.com and let them serve your needs. Now back to Las2First. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Las2First Podcast, where we bring you, again, the latest and greatest innovators, the leaders who are evolving and pushing this industry from last to first in today's supply chain. Today, I really don't even want to introduce it and diminish it, but this is really my brother. We share a lot in common. We'll get into the story. But today we have a really, really special guest, a treat. I'm just as intrigued as hope you are to listen to this story. We've got Eddie Pillow, who is the second-generation owner and CEO of Pillow Logistics based in Indianapolis, Indiana. Eddie, welcome to Las2First Podcast.
Jason, I appreciate this opportunity, man. and technically, we are the Pillow Logistics Group. We've grown beyond just Pillow Logistics.
The Pillow Logistics Group, the
yes,
PLG.
Sir.
I
That's
love it.
right, yeah.
When did that happen?
Really past year or so, Pillow is my last name. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges is as you run a regional courier company and you start to expand your footprint, we did a phenomenal job in our base market of branding.
Yeah.
But when you start getting outside those markets, people think you deliver pillow. And I don't want to give any more work to my pillow guy. He gets enough work, right? So looking at how we can take the name, incorporate final mile elements, because it's technically the Pillow Logistics Group Final Mile, and really starting to be more connected to the industry so people don't think that we deliver pillows express, which is how my dad started the business.
Yeah. We'll get into your dad and all that.
Yeah.
Just tying up fun. So when I was running so we're both second generation owners,
Yes, sir.
right? Our parents both started our businesses.
Yep.
We've sold ours, you're still running yours.
Yep.
Our name was Quick Courier Services, Inc. And I took it upon myself to rebrand the company to QCS Logistics. And did a whole.
How did that go over? Because I get a little bit of pushback on the.
that's probably an episode. I think I've had my dad on this podcast.
Okay,
if he hasn't already come on
we'll
yet,
talk about rebranding.
Yeah, but did not go well, and it ended with him saying, "Who made this decision? I am Quick Courier Services." So, but
similar conversation.
Yeah,
was had,
but the motivation was because we lost a large RFP that I know we killed it on.
Yeah.
And there's a question at the end of the presentation where the client said, "You can't possibly do all this stuff because you're just a courier company." Right. And I never forgot that. And so immediately I went back and said, "We got to rebrand."
Yep.
And so it kind of ties into what you're saying now. You want to grow beyond what those expectations are, but you know what you can do. But to our community, you may need to reposition how you are branded.
And that's the beauty of being able to come into a business as a second generation, right? Where, you're standing on the shoulders of the founder, my father, who's still, I say he's as engaged as he wants to be, but never say he's retired. But the flip side is that, you're supposed to take what that foundation they've given you and grow on that. And just like you, we started off as a same day career company delivering from A to B, and we do. That's still our core business, but we do so much more. And again, like you said, when you start to expand your footprint, people might know the core business, your core customers, but as you really want to grow beyond where you were at, there can be challenges if the name is very restrictive. And so that same conversation was had, that same pushback was given, but we're moving forward anyway.
You won the battle.
Yeah.
Right,
so the goal really would be, if I had to be very forward, PLG Final Mile. Kind of like what you did with Quick Courier, right? QCS. So again, I love Pillow. I'm proud. I wear it proudly. It's my last name. But just being able to take that name and really moving it more toward the industry. So when people see it, when they see PLG Final Mile, they immediately know the name. They can recognize exactly what we do, and it's not a 20-minute back and forth about delivering pillows.
You don't have to explain the name.
That's right.
Explaining what
That's
you do.
right.
Yeah.
No.
All right, let's go back. We jumped ahead a little bit there. I got excited about that.
No, man, that's all good.
So your dad founded a business what year?
1988.
1988.
Yes, sir.
And he founded it with the goal of being a same-day messenger courier.
So
what y'all doing?
I'll give you the personal side. So my dad, to give you a little bit of background, and I always say this because I got to give credence to both my parents, as you too. Yeah. My parents have always been my mentors. My mom was an educator, went into higher ed administration, and my dad was an Indiana All-Star. Actually, my parents met at Indiana State. My dad was a basketball player, star basketball player at Indiana State. My mom was the first African-American cheerleader. They met in the late 60s. So they just have been dynamic. Toward the late 80s, my dad had worked in state government, had a career at Xerox early on. His career in state government was kind of winding down. At the time, my parents were actually divorcing, and my dad knew he didn't want to go back and work for someone else. Yeah. Had an opportunity with a friend that worked for a local hospital, said, hey, we've got multiple couriers. We're using all these different things. I think there's an opportunity for you. So it wasn't something that he was groomed in the final mile business or company. I think it was just kind of a foreign concept. As you know, when you're in the final mile space, if you have a minivan, immediately you're in the final mile business. The barriers of entry are very low.
Phone in the car.
That's right.
And we got a shot.
So, boom, he was in business, right? Picking up stat deliveries. And I remember going out with him when I was 11, 12 years old at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning thinking, why? What are we doing? But that's how we got to start. Yeah. Literally one guy in a minivan and one account.
So same. So I remember being in those Ford Ranger stick shift pickup trucks riding around doing hospital deliveries at 2 in the morning. My dad.
That's right.
Probably parallel tracks. All right. So you don't immediately go into the business, right? Your journey was you started a different career path. So after you go to high school, college.
Yes, sir.
What happens? Give me a little sense of your career path back to Pillow.
Sure. So I would say I always grew up around the business, not necessarily working for them. I think I did maybe one summer or a couple college breaks doing maybe on-demand runs just to pick up a couple dollars here and there. Yeah. The business was very different back then, probably much like your QCS when your dad was running it. It was 80% on-demand business. Mm-hmm. So obviously as the business evolved, it became more of a routed business. I went undergraduate at Hampton University in Virginia, got a degree in business, and that was kind of motivated looking at what my dad was doing. Yeah. I got a job right out of college in pharmaceuticals, so actually brought me to the West Coast. I was in the Pacific Northwest and then spent the majority of my career actually here in California. So I was in central, the Bay Area, and then in Los Angeles, marketing, sales. I got my MBA at Pepperdine up in Los Angeles. Yeah. So I knew my track at some point would lead me back to business. I didn't necessarily think coming back to Indiana and running the Pillow Logistics Group. Yeah. I was thinking, probably still more coastal, Yeah. But it's interesting working in corporate America because I had a young lady I was working with. She was a regional director, had gotten fast-tracked, and we were about the same age. And she told me on one of our contacts, we were doing an annual review. She had gotten a chance to do a rotation in international marketing, which was an interest that I really had, especially when I was doing my MBA. Yeah. And she said, well, I could see you doing that in about 10 years. And I thought, okay, this woman's about 6 months younger than I am.
How old are you at this time?
I'm probably 32, 33. Okay. Right. And she's about 6 months younger than I am. And again, she had been afforded an opportunity. And I thought, it's interesting because people can always have a vision for you. And it's obviously not the same vision that we had. So I thought, well, let me really reevaluate where I'm going to go in corporate America. I was fortunate. The company was going through, at the time, a downsize. They had just paid for my MBA. And so I didn't have
locked
to.
In for
I was. But then when they offered the package, I thought this is a blessing in disguise because I knew my track would be it would be capped at some point. And ironically, I have a lot of friends that work in corporate America that I've seen hit that ceiling.
Yeah.
Very talented individuals. And I remember, and I'm jumping ahead, when I came back to the company, my dad said, at some point, your conversations with your friends will be very different. It's a very employee mindset with them, and yours is, again, the sky's the limit. Yeah. And he was right. So at that time in 2010, I called him up and said, okay, he had just come out to California for my graduation for my MBA. I said, I was looking at some other opportunities with some other companies. I said, I actually think it's time to come back if you'll have me. Honestly, I just, I was very humble. Yeah. And it was just mutually beneficial. Yeah. It was good timing for him, as I found out. And it definitely was a blessing for me. I knew there would be challenges. I was kind of used to the structure of a corporate America and expense accounts. And when you run a small business, corporate America, right? You can take a sabbatical, you can take off, you can go away for a month. Small business.
You got a handbook. You got policy.
Small business, it's like if you don't show up, then no one's going to be there to do your job. Right. So it was a totally different mindset. Yeah.
Pause for a second.
Sure.
I want to get into that because it's almost like I'm talking to myself to you because that happened to me in 2008, 2 years before you. Yep. But I remember specifically, and it was saying I was in corporate America and thought I was doing really well. Yeah. And they came to me and said, we have a new opportunity for you. And I'm like, oh, great. I'll work my way up quickly, right? And so they presented another job to me. I'm like, okay, I can do that. Yeah. And then the end of the conversation said, but you're still going to do the job you're doing now. Of course. You're just going to do this job. Yes. I'm like, okay, I'm not. I'm like,
but the money's not doubling, right?
I'm like, okay, well, how much more? You're like,
right.
You're nothing. Yeah. I'm like, wait, you want me to do 2 jobs for the price of 1?
Yeah.
And that was quickly when I started realizing the same thing you said was like, this is probably not for me. Yep. But what I want to dig into with you is, so when you started having those conversations with your dad about coming back in, that I remember my conversations. It was negotiation. It was not just I'm coming back. Yeah. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I was not clearly as savvy as you. I did not know how much I was going to be paid. I didn't really know the financial state of the business. And so I did not want to assume anything. I was not, I literally obviously had my MBA degree, but I was not going there as a MBA to run the company.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I came in sales. I didn't want to come back as the owner's son and any sort of assumption or what have you. Yeah. I was not going to put any sort of financial pressure on the business from a salary standpoint or from an expectation standpoint. Right. So, when I say I came back, like humble pie, it was humble pie. I actually moved in with my dad, which, by the way, he said was the fastest anyone's ever moved in and moved out. I was there probably for about 60 days. I found a house. It's like, this is a short-term thing. We work together, and I can't come home and talk business. Oh, yeah. But it was, again, it was a blessing. It was truly a blessing to come back in because, I had watched my dad over the years. Funny you were talking about your experience in corporate America. 2 years prior to, I had won a President's Club award, and it was an all-expense paid vacation to Cabo. And I thought, of all the people I could take, I'm going to take my dad. Nobody ever does anything for him, takes him anywhere. So we went, they flew him out from Indianapolis to Cabo, and the entire time he's on his, at the time, BlackBerry. I mean, the guy is just, and I said, man, just, can you turn it off? And I know now why. Wow. The level of engagement that he had to be at. And, when you're 20s, 30s, 40s, you can run. You know, he was getting up there. No knock on, you know, his stamina, but I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And so, like I said, it was just a mutually beneficial relationship. So when I came back, I didn't have an expectation. I really didn't know where I would fit. I didn't know this industry. So, and my dad, one of his favorite sayings is trial by fire. So there wasn't a 90-day orientation process. It was pretty much, here's a book.
Yeah.
Call these people, see if we can find something. And even though my MBA was kind of general, I really spent between the first 30 to 90 days understanding the profit and loss, the P&L, going through each account, understanding, margins and things like that. And that was probably, and then also learning and selling, but that was probably my biggest value, that first 6 months.
Yeah. Did he, I'm thinking about my track and similar, I remember walking in and they kind of try to, you go talk to this person, dispatch, go talk to customer service. And I drove for a couple of weeks. And I grew up around the business, so I was familiar with it, obviously. But I also remember probably like the second week there being like, man, like there's no blueprint. There's no SOP. There's no one that can really tell me what to do. And then the more I started questioning and asking the people in the room, and my dad was, my dad's a serial entrepreneur, as you know, and he's got other ventures. So he's not in the office every day. And I'm like, who do I go to? And then I quickly started realizing, like, me. Like, I've got to figure this out. And so you start to feel that pressure of, even though you're not the owner yet, but you're the owner's son, and you're trying to come in and not ruffle too many feathers. But at the same time, I didn't come here to maintain status quo.
That's right.
So talk to me about like that process for you of how you come from corporate America. You come in, it's a small business, epitome of it, right? But you got to get this thing to the next level, because the only way you're going to make the more money you want and to carry the legacy on is to grow. How do you start navigating that?
So it's interesting because you said corporate America, and that was probably the biggest. I was a bit of an outlier. Again, the staff was very warm, but I was a bit of an outlier because a lot of the staff had been really with the company 10, 15 years. I had a lot of legacy people, and that's a good thing, right? I mean, you can't find that, loyalty. The challenge with that is that's all they knew. All they knew was within the four walls. So it was nice to be able to bring in a level of, I would say, professionalism that maybe a lot of those folks weren't exposed to. Again, being in healthcare, being in pharmaceuticals, you're acquiescing to physicians and healthcare groups. So it's a different type of sell. You're used to selling to corporate customers, and you're not just coming in as a vendor, in theory. So to your point, SOPs were not in place, and even the level of professionalism and decorum. So one of the first things, and this might not sound significant, was the phones used to ring and ring and ring, and my dad still has this thing, and I still have it technically. When you call the logistics group, I was going to correct myself, there's a live person to answer the phone. What I noticed within the first week was the phones would just ring and ring and ring and ring, and then someone would say, Pillow Logistics or Pillow Express at the time, can you please hold? And they would put a customer on hold, and then they would take a next call coming in. So simple fix, but I said, why don't we have our calls after the third ring rolled to an answering service? We use an answering service after hours anyway, and they can at least have a live person. They can get all the information. So now there's never this, I'm on hold. You'll never be on hold. You will always, because if they're calling from a hospital, a medical clinic, you want that level of service. Just those small things. We're not even talking about the actual TMS system, which at the time was dated, and I know I engaged you with CXT. You know the story there.
I remember coming up there.
It was ugly, and I didn't know anything about that. That was my first kind of big project. But so it was just the little tweaks to customer service, response to email, and just professionalism. And really, they had already made the switch to the Pillow Logistics. They had done a branding really right before I came, so the template was already in place. But it just took someone from the outside. Who could say, hey, I'm coming from this, again, corporate background. Let's bring in some fresh eyes. My dad had been technically out of a corporate environment for, at that point, 20 years. And let's up our game, because we want to present ourselves in the market, not as a minority company, not as a small business, which I still think the mindset was definitely that, but as a professional service organization.
Did you find that as you started to kind of make those inroads, make some changes, the staff, like this legacy staff that's been there, right?
Everybody was on board.
They're receptive.
I'm joking.
I was like, wait, what?
I'm joking.
Like, that didn't happen to me. So, and that's tough, right? So
tough.
you got people that's been there, that's got the company from where they were to where they are now.
Right.
Here you come in and they know you as Eddie,
Right.
George's son.
Right.
You know, come around the office, hanging out.
Popping in every once in a while.
But now Eddie's in here
Right.
telling me what I've been doing wrong
Right.
for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
There's just an inevitable conflict.
Yes, sir.
There. How's that play out?
So last class I took for my graduate degree was organizational behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And they tell you the first thing to do is not make a bunch of changes when you come into an organization. So the first thing I did was made a bunch of changes when I came into the organization. So clearly I did not pay attention to that class. Yeah. That was supposed to be an easy one credit class. I didn't make a lot of changes, again, really on the service levels. I think it just became obvious as you raise the level of expectation with people.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the things we start doing was job descriptions. That might sound simple, but I think that when people are doing a little bit of everything, sometimes things fall through the crack and no one wants to take accountability. So once you start creating and saying, okay, so this is your task. Your task is to, again, collect money, for example. And you look at your AR collections and it's out of whack and you say, wait, this is your job. I hate to say people fire themselves, but you start to create accountability around the work that needs to be done. Yeah. Now, again, there's also an unfolding. I'm going through that process now. There's some unwinding, right? Because people make processes very complicated because that's their job security, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just saying, well, this is a simple process. It's understanding the process. And I can say that now, sitting here 14 years later. At the time, I didn't. Yeah. But when you start to kind of peel those things back, you understand, okay, there's a lot of things that are happening here, redundant, and especially when you're looking for areas to be more efficient. And I think that was probably where it was. Some people get it. Some people kind of adopt to it. Some people don't. And again, those who don't, as they say, they self-select. The one thing I can say about Pillow and my dad is that my dad taught me the value of taking care of your people. I got to be careful what I say next. We have helped people out in times, financially. And that's the thing when you do a small business emotionally. We've adopted families, whether it be a driver or an employee and things like that for the holidays. So, my dad created a culture of being very benevolent. The challenge with that sometimes is people start to expect those things. Sure. And then when you raise the level of expectation and you push accountability, people then start to push back because they think, well, it's always been this way. I can always show up at this time and leave at this time and do these things and not really have to do my job. So not saying that obviously my dad was not managing the staff because, again, I get it. Now that I'm in the mix, I get it. Yeah. But yeah, there was definitely resistance. But I think that when you explain the vision, and I had a long-term employee, that was probably one of my hardest terms, who was literally phenomenal. You know the person. But when I brought in people from industry, because that's really the value I brought, is once I start to understand what was going on, I realized that, and I told her this, that everything I know, and vice versa. So I said, we need to bring in additional people from this industry that can help us get to that next level. Yeah. And as I started to bring those people in, I could see the resistance. And I said, the vision is we want to be a regional player. We want to be a national player. Yeah. And when you realize that people are comfortable being small, people are very comfortable in their space, then you say, well, this might not be the place for you. Right. At some point, it was, but then at some point, I have visions. The organization has visions. And I'll be honest, and I was listening to a fellow business owner talk about their business in COVID. Our business blew up. I was surprised at how much business there was out there, how much business we were able to pick up. But to be honest, I was more surprised and impressed at the ability to flex up. And that would not have happened had we had those same people in place, because they were so limited in their thought. You had to bring in people from industry to be able to put the business in a position to be able to take on the growth that came.
Yeah. All right, so let's start getting there. Before we get into that side, paint the picture for me. You walk in 2010. This month, actually. 2010. All right.
June.
Yeah. So you're 14 years.
Yes, sir.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Give me some sense of the size of the company, driver, revenue range, like where you are then, and then let's kind of pick up to You've transitioned to a leadership position now. I want to hear a little bit about when you went from being the salesperson
Sure.
to obviously now being the president
Yep.
of the company, and then where you guys are now or heading now.
Yeah. So when I came into the business was really supported by 3 large anchor accounts. And I always say the challenge with that is that when one sneezes, the entire company feels it. So we had 3 large anchor accounts that had been legacy accounts, but they were still significant portions of our business. We were probably in the revenue range about $2 million,
Okay.
a little over $2 million, between $2 and $3 million. So that's, I know, big range. We were probably running about 30 independent contractors within an 80-ish mile radius of Indianapolis. At the time, the facility we were in was in an office park. We weren't doing any on-site fulfillment work. We had about 8 to 10 W-2 employees. So the business was, I would say, pretty consistent for our industry. I mean, if you'll find a lot of businesses kind of in that. Yes. So we were really kind of trending with aspirations to do more. Now, I will say that my dad had an opportunity and did a joint venture a few years prior to with one of our competitors in town and opened a company called United Courier in Cincinnati. So he, at one time, had expanded operations into the Cincinnati market. So he had flexed up. So, I mean, I just don't want you to think in 20 years it had just always been that. He had really had some large growth opportunities. But as he always said, man, if you were here then, I could have put you over in Cincy and run that. Yeah. So he sold that off successfully and then kind of focused his efforts on our core company. So today, and I'll go back to COVID because COVID's were much better numbers. I think most people would agree with that.
Yeah,
probably in excess of $12 million. So pretty significant jump. Our staff and we went through the SBA 8A program, so we picked up government contracts, which are W-2 employees.
Doing what kind of work?
Doing mailroom, doing courier work. Other states, we were doing work in Illinois for a couple of the Army bases. We were doing work at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland. We were doing work here in California, supporting a mailroom. So
staffing a mailroom, managing the mail,
correct,
and delivering it.
Yeah, so on site, and we were already doing that in India as well. But we were able to kind of take that into the federal government. We still do some work on the GSA. So we swelled up to close to 45 W-2 employees, close to 200 independent contractors. Yeah. We'd opened up really 3 additional locations. We purchased a building, which was really the when I came into the business, one of the challenges that we had was we had very limited banking opportunities. We had a great regional bank, but they only gave us enough to get halfway to the next step.
You're talking about from a capital
standpoint, from a capital lending standpoint. Yes. So within about 5 years, we were able to engage a new bank. I'll say Key Bank, which has been phenomenal, SBA. And we went from like limping along literally to surging. It really just set the foundation.
For the audience, talk about why that is important when you're trying to scale and grow, and in light of our industry and how the billing and the payments, you mentioned AR earlier, like that float you have to have.
So in this industry, independent contractors or drivers, we pay them weekly because obviously they are utilizing their vehicles. They have to, sometimes if you have a master, they are paying a subcontractor. They're paying their employees. They pay their fuel. So we pay them weekly. The challenge was at any given time when I came into the business, we might have had maybe $30,000 to $50,000 on a line of credit back and forth, which is not much money at all. And we had some loans that we were working through. And a lot of it was, again, some of the management that was in place just was not well-versed on how to run a business.
Yeah.
We were able to turn that around. I brought on an accountant a couple of years later who really helped out. We weren't billing. That was part of the issue. So we were able to uncover a lot of things those first couple of years. Yeah. So at the time, our driver pay weekly was maybe $18,000 to $20,000. And even that, I was sweating. I mean, there were a lot of sweating. And I remember telling my dad, probably getting off into the weeds, I don't know how you do this. I don't know how you do this because it was literally it was like a race to the bank with waiting for checks. When I came on board, believe it or not, a lot of our customers were still doing hard checks. So we transitioned those first couple of years more to ACH, right?
Yeah.
But we literally lived and breathed, and we still do, by the payments coming in from our customers, 30-day customers, some 60-day and 90-day. But I mean, the first couple of years were tough. I'm probably getting ahead of myself. We had a customer ask for a price reduction. I had to ask for money back from our drivers. We didn't lose any drivers, but I had to peel back 100 a week from drivers in order to, again, maintain the profitability of the business. Yeah. I personally, again, came in making less than I had been making in corporate America, and I had to take a pay cut twice in those early years. But, as an entrepreneur, and I understood this, and I did that only for my executive team. So my father, myself, and our general manager. Right. But I understood coming into this was not a get-rich-quick scheme, but I also understood what was at stake. Again, like you, I had worked in corporate America. I knew what it was like to be an employee, and I was willing to make those sacrifices early on, knowing that I was going to bank on myself. Let me get back to what I was talking about with regard to our building. One of the things that I would find when we would talk to bankers was they said, well, you really don't have any assets, right? I see you got some trucks, you got a couple computers, things like that, but these aren't really collateral. And we can obviously look at your receivables and look at that, but that's here today, gone tomorrow.
Right.
So one of my goals was, I said, I need to be able to buy a building, real estate, something for the business, to have something tangible so we can be more marketable to banks. Right. And again, COVID, a lot of things around that really helped fuel our business. And one of the things that came out of that was we were able to purchase a building in I'm getting my dates off. What year is this? 24? Okay, I'm getting 21.
I remember a few years after we did talking about this.
So we purchased a building, and it shored up the balance sheet. Yeah. It just, we had, like I said, these strong banking relationships because they believed in the business. They believed in the second gen ownership. They believed in the direction that we were going. And we paid off all of our business debt. The business today is debt free. Wow. And those are, to me, the biggest gifts. Not that I'm giving my dad a gift, but to me, that is the biggest gift, the biggest blessing. I said is, what value am I going to bring to the organization? Financial stability. It was very unstable. Not knocking, my dad or prior management, but it was unstable because I get it as an entrepreneur. You are wearing so many hats, and you were constantly putting out fires. When I came in, that was my goal, was to change the paradigm. I said, I can't operate in chaos. Yeah. How do we get to a place of financial stability? That was the most important thing. And that's kind of where we are today.
First, congrats. Because a lot of times it shouldn't go unnoticed of how difficult it is to transition from a first gen to a second gen. Yeah. And it gets even harder second gen to third gen. Yeah. We've shared those experiences. Yeah. And I also have felt, part of my mission when I got involved with QCS is, how do I give back to my parents? They give so much into me. Absolutely. What can I give back to them? Absolutely. And so the fact that you have done that and navigated that and got your dad in a spot where he can do what he wants to do, he work when he want to work. He wants to do. But just on your dad, when I was first coming in, this is a couple years before you, my dad, he and I flew to Indy to meet with your dad. Okay. Right. And we went to the club he likes to
Columbia
go to.
Club.
Columbia Club.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Why not?
And it was, it didn't mean much at the time, but later when we went to sell QCS, what he told me, I can remember him sitting at the club and telling me, and we talked about Pillow. Yeah. It's like a vehicle. Yeah. He said it needs tires, it needs an oil change, it needs gas. Yeah. And ultimately, its job is to run and drive. And your job as the owner is to sit in that vehicle and drive it as far as you can go.
That's right.
But it's an asset.
That's right.
And he talked about how never forget that this is an asset. That your job is to grow, and hopefully one day you can capitalize on.
That's right.
And it didn't make much sense at the time to me. But when we went to exit, that held true because I was struggling with, at the time, should we sell, should we not? Right. And I remember your dad telling me that. And your dad just, man, when you're around your dad, he's
like the opposite of me. He is big personality.
He's big personality, man. You gotta love him. You gotta love him. But let's go a little further into this. So
Can I throw something out real quick?
yeah, let's do it.
You talked about the Columbia Club. That's a private club my dad has been a part of. It's right on the Circle in Indianapolis, a very old club.
Yeah.
And it's funny, the story behind that is one of the first accounts after my dad had been in business for a couple of years was G-Tech. G-Tech is the state's lottery, actually. They're called IGT now. They're based out of Rhode Island. And they manage lotteries in many states. And when they came to Indiana, they were looking for a minority partner. They needed him to install lottery terminals, deliver lottery terminals to all 92 counties in Indiana. I don't know what the time frame was, but they delivered it within 2 weeks prior to the timeline, ahead of schedule, and that's been an account that we've had off and on for years. Yeah. But he said when the executives were flying in from Rhode Island, he said at the time my dad had this office downtown. He said, if I bring these guys here, I am not going to get this work because they're going to look around and say, man, I mean, are you kidding me?
More, yeah.
So he said he went and he started, he got a membership at the Columbia Club. And he said those guys came in, the people at the Columbia Club are, Mr. Pillow this and Mr. Pillow that. And he said, blew them away. So it's just funny because, for the longest time, that's where we entertain clients. Yeah. And that, again, is also a blessing about our new corporate location now where we've entertained clients there. I said, that's the evolution of the business, right? It's where, you fake it till you make it. Yeah. And, now in Indy, we have the two locations, our corporate office on Ridgeview, and then we have a warehouse facility about 20,000 square feet, about a mile down the road. Yeah. So again, that's, the gift that you bring is to say, hey, I get it. In the beginning, as all entrepreneurs, you don't have everything. You don't have the accoutrement, but you got to put the face on like you do, right? Yeah. Then you get the work, and then how do you reinvest back in that business? And then as you continue to grow, make it look good.
Yeah. You fake it till you make it.
That's right.
Yeah. But they definitely knew because we sat here at his own table.
Oh yeah,
it was first class. All right, but let's get into
sure.
Now you're sitting here, and you've come, from 2010 walking in, not knowing much about the business to now you are looked as a leader in this industry.
Yeah.
You're on. We both serve on the CLD board. Yes. I want to talk a little bit about what that means because most people don't know the history of this. Is my father served as the first African American board member of the CLD on the CLD board.
Yeah.
Your dad was the second board member, and I can't remember what time this was, but it was probably 20-some years later.
Yep.
I came on as the third, and here you are as the fourth. Right, so we're doing some right here.
We're still around. That's that's half the battle.
But the family legacy is one piece, right? But for you now as a leader, not just in your organization, sure, but in the industry, what does that mean to you?
It's I keep going there. It's just a blessing to be here, to be honest. I know when my dad was on the board, and I know he really looked at your dad because your dad just did phenomenal things. You said serial entrepreneur, had strong banking relationships, which we were always like, that's what we need. This business, and there's a lot of consolidation. There's a lot of M&A going on. So there's a lot of us who are still kind of there, and again, who knows what the future holds. I'd say being able to at least be at the board level, industry level, you do get a kind of a purview as to what's going on in the market. Mm-hmm. Like I said earlier in the conversation, a lot of career companies are under $1 million, between that 2 to 3 million. Like I said, we're in that over 10. But then there's some companies doing 50 million. That's what we'd like to get, obviously. We have a growth plan to get to about 25, 30 million in the next 5 years. Aggressive plan to get there. For me, it's a responsibility because I think that you have to, number one, engage those who want to come into the industry and say, hey, how do I make this work? And, hopefully I can impart some knowledge of things I learned and say, hey, do this, don't do this. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's a business. And so, that's one thing that I think I've constantly heard. Your father was a business person. You are a business person. My father was a business person. So, I don't get hung up too much on the particulars of personalities or the reasons why you're not going to win. As I mentioned earlier in this broadcast, that, I remember my dad saying sometimes I had to be the last one to get paid. Mm-hmm. It's a business. Yeah. And, you have to run it as such. And that's where I feel like being on this board, if I can help kind of mentor other businesses along, and then quite frankly, increase my exposure. I'm not going to lie. I mean, this has been a great opportunity for me for the first, 6-7 years. I was inwardly focused on the business, and I thank you again for always. I think you drug me to my first ECA, if I remember, down in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think
and,
so. Yeah,
and now our president Matthew Straub, who came from a competitor, is on the board of another association, and so I feel so fortunate that we have exposure on a national level to different boards and industry events. And now it's not just the one or two events I'm going to, it's multiple events, and to be outwardly focused. And that's why I said that name to the PLG Final Mile is so important. Like I said, for the first couple of years, you're just literally battling fires. Yeah. So I feel hopefully that's the evolution of our business, is to mentor those who are kind of coming along. And then also, like I said, see what's up ahead. But then again, expand our brand and say, hey, it's not just about CLDA. It's not just about the ECA. It's about Home Delivery World. It's about air cargo. It's about all these other different associations, and how can we just expand our brand, our footprint, and our exposure.
Yeah. Well, you've done a tremendous job, and you've been able to not navigate the second generation thing. You've been able to navigate how to expand, grow into different verticals, operate different regions.
Yeah.
I don't want to diminish that, because that's even when I was running our business, like we expanded from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, Mississippi.
Yeah.
But we didn't get too far away from home base, because I think there's a little trepidation with my parents. Honestly, full disclosure, there was some heated battles on some opportunities that
I get it.
They just help kind of put the handcuffs on me. But one thing I want to talk about, you just mentioned competition.
Yes, sir.
Right. So you've obviously in the market we have competition.
Yep.
You mentioned one of your top guys is come from a competitor.
Yep.
What is that like? Because this is a very incestuous industry.
Yes,
like we all know each other.
Absolutely.
I think we, for the most part, play well together.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's business.
It is.
Right. And I've had my fair share of issues.
Yep.
But some I created, some I didn't. But how do you separate the business from the personal? Or can you?
Yeah. Well, like I said, my dad went in and did a joint venture with Now Courier, Ryan Schwalbach, who's on the board, his dad, and they started United Courier, and they ended that relationship. So, that was an opportunity where my dad approached his biggest competitor in town. Mm-hmm. I think you can get kind of hung up on, the guy down the street. What I have seen, especially talk about growing markets, is that competitors now don't necessarily have to have brick and mortar in your market, right? They can easily operate off of a customer's dock, and then bim, bam, boom, they've got a routed presence, and then they can create an on-demand presence, and the next thing you know, they're knocking on the doors of your existing customers. So competitors are interesting, but then the flip side is, again, being involved with the CLDA, going to some of the other industry shows. Your competitors can actually be a source of opportunities, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes they might say, hey, I'm stronger in this particular area, but you're stronger in this particular area. So it might be an opportunity to partner together. We actually house space at our facility for Priority in Cincinnati. They have cage space. And are they a competitor? I think they operate in Indianapolis. But, to me, that is probably the blessing as far as this industry, like you said, is very incestuous. Dick Thomas, who started that company, who actually started one of the founders of the CLDA, Messenger Courier, MCAA at the time. Yeah. So, it's a weird thing, right? You can look at people and say, well, this guy, we're going to be competing on the same work, but at the same time, you can also get a call from a guy that's maybe not in your market, but regionally, and say, hey, I'm bidding on some work. Yeah. Would you like to cut you in, because I know you're a lot stronger in the southern part of the state where I'm stronger in the northern part? And you say, absolutely. I've called competitors. I did a banking several years ago, RFP, and it was a multi-state overnight banking deal. And at the time, I had limited capacity in the northern part of the state and into Michigan. And so I called a competitor, and we did a joint venture to bid that. So it's, obviously when you go into a customer, you're trashing them, but at the end of the day, they can, it can be an opportunity. And so, and we've used our MBE status. I mean, I don't want to overlook that.
Yeah.
So, if a competitor calls us and say, hey, we need a minority, whatever, I think we picked up some work for a company out of Missouri, and we're doing some work in Indiana for them. So, it's your friends, your foes, but at the end of the day, this industry is just, we're all in the same bucket.
Yeah. It's kind of the saying, keep your friends close, your enemies closer.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, we've all benefited from these relationships. And sometimes it's tricky, but sometimes most times it's beneficial.
Yeah.
I want to move into two more kind of final questions here before we wrap up. Part of the Las2First is for you to tell your personal journey of Las2First, which you've done a lot. I know you've had an experience that most of us, I get choked up thinking about it. Your son, Noah, passed away.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to meet Noah several occasions.
Yeah.
Lucky that he looked up to me in a certain capacity.
He did.
He did.
He really did.
I don't know why.
He really did.
And unfortunately lost him to substance abuse. And he was in high school at the time. This was
just a year ago.
Yeah, it was a year ago. So, I have kids. Can't begin to imagine.
Yeah.
In the midst of the growth, in the midst of all the good things happening,
that's right.
This comes into your life.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that? How does that just not drown you in pain and sorrow? What did you find in that experience to keep you going?
Thank you again. It's a journey. I mean, losing a child is, there's nothing else to say. And there was a lot of mental health issues, and that's the mental health is kind of what subject to substance abuse, and it was actually fentanyl overdose. That being said, as I was saying earlier in the conversation, when you're in corporate America, you can take a sabbatical and you can take the time off. When you're an entrepreneur, you can take a couple days, you can work from home, but things are happening in real time. Yeah. And I can't lie to you and say that I was not in a fog. Now, the challenges I had with my son, it didn't just come up abruptly. So there was probably about a year prior to of a lot. And I really had to be dependent upon my support staff. So I say support staff, our president, our controller, our operations team, everyone was very supportive. That being said, you just start kind of letting things happen. You kind of go on autopilot. So I would say for me, believe it or not, the business was the biggest blessing. Having something to go to. I'll even go back 2 steps and say prior to Noah's passing, COVID was a blessing. A lot of parents had to be at home with their children. I took Noah to the office every day. So I was not at home with my child every day. He was the next office over, driving me crazy. but I thank God because literally we had a place to go every day, get up, keep that routine going, and then he jumped on a Zoom. I mean, the thing is, I remember when my grandmother passed away, and my dad was very close to his mother. I was close to my grandmother, and he said, the thing about business is, he said I think we buried my grandmother on a Thursday, and he had a meeting with bankers on Friday, and he said he went in to that meeting, and they said, George, we're sorry that your mother passed, and then they went right into business. Yeah. And unfortunately, or fortunately, that's how things were for me. I was still being hit with issues day to day, and we had just really won a large piece of work. So I can't say I was giving it my full engagement, but it was enough that I didn't take a 6-month sabbatical and just kind of go into whatever. You still have to process it, and it's a daily journey, obviously. Yeah. But I'm thankful in that standpoint for the business, and I would say that really, 24, I have probably snapped back, and so I think to the teams like maybe dislike, I've gotten re-engaged
Yeah.
and have made some pivots internally. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we all go through things in life and business. And again, at the end of the day, it helped me to reevaluate my priorities. Again, I was thinking, I'm second generation, my son, third generation. I do have a brother that's been in and out of the business, and he has children. And you think, well, maybe, at some point the business can do that. So, I started thinking about my own mortality and, think I don't want to do this when I'm 75. So what does that look like? And okay, maybe I was doing this, to pay through college and this, that, and the other. And you think, well, maybe now that I don't necessarily have those things in the focus, maybe I can think about retirement earlier. So maybe it pushes me a little bit harder, honestly, to get to some financial goals. So, it's all a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
And that's not easy stuff. It's a terrible, I'm gonna make a terrible analogy. But it's like, being a former athlete, football player, you'd be in the middle of a practice or game and a guy pops an ACL or some tragic happens. And literally blow the whistle and they move the ball 5 yards up, next man up, play. And the guy can still be screaming behind you.
Yeah.
And it starts to, it's a mental, it's a mind fuck.
Yeah.
I'll curse a little bit.
No.
But you but it starts to your point, like life goes on.
It does. It's interesting. And I'll say this, and I'll move off this topic if you don't mind.
Yeah.
There was another tragedy around the same time, and I've been in contact with the parents of the other young man, and it's interesting sometimes. Just people deal with grief very differently, and I would never tell people not to do it. So sometimes when you look at your journey and you look at other people, and you can say other people are kind of still in the midst of it. So I'm thankful. Again, I have a strong religious foundation. I thank my parents for that.
Yeah.
And I think it has helped kind of push me forward. And again, like I said, I'm thankful for this business.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for people in this industry. They've reached out. So that's where I'm at. And it's just given me really, I'm going to go there, Jason. It's given me a new fire to give my all, not just for my son, for myself.
Yeah.
For myself. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so let's wrap up on this.
Sure.
So that fire,
yes, sir.
that burning fire you have now, right? You mentioned a few minutes ago you want to get to 25 million.
Yes,
You have
sir.
an aggressive plan.
Absolutely.
A little bit about how you plan to get there, but bigger, back to time to Las2First, right? This industry is on fire.
Yes, sir.
Right? It's blowing and going, and we are benefiting from it. It's a grind. But where do you see the industry going? How does your ambitions to go to this next $25 million level, and how far as you want to go?
Yeah.
And then at the end of that, what is the end? Like, is there an end? Have you even had the opportunity to really process that fully?
Yeah.
So I'll let you close on that.
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure that out as far as what's next. If you would have asked me that 6 months ago, I would have told you about some lines of work that we're in right now, and I'm kind of getting some challenging information about DDU. I don't know if you've seen much as far as postal rates, and a lot of companies that do DDU final mile work, that work is kind of drying up. So I would have said, oh yeah, put all your money in DDU. Don't do that. Don't do that. Or retail, because we've gotten into pool distribution. So that could be a variable thing. Again, our core focus, I'll just say what our current core focus is pool distribution. We do some work in retail, small parcel. One of the things that we are actively looking for, and this is why I really had to shore up the balance sheet, is acquisition. So it takes a lot to open a location. You were talking about your parents' trepidation to open up. I understand. It takes a lot to open up a location and make it profitable. It makes more sense if you can find another business, maybe in a complementary or synergistic vertical that you want to be in, but definitely in a desirable location, so you can expand your footprint and maybe put a current customer on top of where that business is, and then maybe pick them up. I haven't done much in the big and bulky world. I've tried to avoid it, but I do know that there's a lot of work out there.
Yeah.
And that's maybe our president's not so happy to hear about that, but again, I'm open. So I don't have one particular vertical I'm telling people to run down, but I would say that having a stronger capacity from a coverage standpoint is definitely desirable for us. That's on the horizon. So again, still keeping it small parcel in some, pool distribution in others, looking at acquisition definitely in 25,
Okay.
in some very strategic markets in the Midwest. I mean, we're not going too far outside of our area, but I think that would be important for us. That's kind of where things go. And yeah, I mean, to me, it's that $25 million target, and then just kind of reevaluate, right? My dad is still an active owner in the business, and at some point, I'd like him to be able to do whatever he wants to do. I'm not saying that we're looking to sell today or tomorrow, but I want the business to I always said this, I always want to be able to go to any bank if I need it.
Mm-hmm.
We've got $1 million line of credit. I always want to be able to go anywhere and not have someone look at me as I'm pariah. I've had those looks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I always want people to say, boy, this would be a great business. And what is your price? I've always said that we should position ourselves to be looked at in a place that people would want to buy, and not I'm giving it away to anybody. So again, there's no plan, there's no date, but that's always been the goal, to say run it. One of the other things I'll give a plug, and maybe I shouldn't. I'm not getting a kickback or anything. Is the book called Traction?
Gino Wickman.
Yes, sir. Look and see, you're all over it.
On it, baby.
I've talked to several people in our space who, that's our big thing. We have actually poster boards up in our office. Reduce, combine, efficiency. These are mantras we live by. We have moved toward dashboards. We use software called eCourier. eCourier has built us a dashboard. I think we're one of the first companies to pilot this dashboard. I have total visibility into my executive dashboard, into my operational dashboard. I know when a driver's not scanning. I can look and see what signature, an exact signature. These are things in real time that 6 months ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I had zero visibility. I'm looking at our on-time percentages. So, these are things from an operational standpoint, from an executive standpoint, and you're talking to your listeners, you got to know your commissions versus your revenue. So if you're paying out more than what you're bringing in, you will not be in business very long.
Yeah.
These are lessons I've learned over the years. And when you get fat in an organization, I'll be honest, COVID, we got a little bloated, and money was just coming in and we didn't look. And now that things aren't as robust, you have to go back to your bottom line. So these are the things I'm looking at today, and even operational efficiency. And I know I'm giving away some of my secret sauce now. We've looked at even how we can outsource some of our labor, whether it be our dispatch, whether it be some of our back office. There are things, maybe even using what we call lumper crews or temporary crews in our warehouse. There are ways that we can say, how do we find margin within the work that we're doing? I mean, I don't know about you, Jason, but I don't know too many customers that are looking to increase their rates on purpose. So customers are obviously looking for a deal, and if their rates are competitive and you're in a competitive situation, then you have to find margin where you can. So operating as efficiently as we can, lean as we can, and then just growing the business, getting out selling. We've made some significant investments in sales software as far as identifying leads. So we've really made, I would say, a 180 pivot within the past 8 to 9 months as far as being forward looking and saying, these are the goals of the organization. These are the EBITDA numbers that we need to be hitting year over year. And how do we do it? And we've engaged in outsource and a third party kind of CFO services that brings us, again, dashboards to work with our internal team. So everybody's got a dashboard. I have a dashboard, even as an executive, right? So this is, like you said, I'm driving that bus, and I don't want to drive it off the cliff. And I always tell Matt, who's our president, again, that everybody's got he tells me everybody's got a boss, and my boss is my dad. So I can always be fired. I don't have that, I don't feel like this is lifetime employment. So I have to make sure that I'm leading this organization to the next level.
Well, I'll say this. I think, I don't know him, but Gino Wickman would be very proud, because what you're describing is a beautifully laid out VTO. Your vision traction organizer.
Absolutely.
And you are a visionary. You've certainly proven that since 2010 when you walked in the doors at Pillow Logistics, now Pillow.
Try.
PG.
Pillow Logistics Group.
Pillow Logistics Group.
We hadn't gone PLG yet. Don't tell my dad. He might not be listening. PLG Final Mile.
Mr. George, it wasn't me.
I'm working on it.
It wasn't my idea. Don't come at me. Right.
I'm working on it.
But Eddie, man, I want to thank you for being on the podcast.
This is a blessing. Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure to have you, man.
Absolutely.
Continued success, continued blessings.
Thank you, sir.
I'm so excited to see you guys get to that 25, 50, $100 million mark. And we'll have you back on the show when you get there.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.